when you're away from your garden, you have other things you're worrying about. Your work or your kids or bills that need paid or a car that needs fixed. So you can kind of think about your garden as a non-stress place to go in your head where you can daydream. So I thought about it a lot, but you also have life to worry about too. So I absolutely want to have a garden, and so much that we've taken part of our yard, about 500 square feet, and changed it from watching the grass grow to watching fruits and vegetables grow. This was the first year we grew a garden, and when we planted everything, we didn't really know what to expect. So when we were at the nursery, we bought one of every plant they had, zucchinis and broccoli and tomatoes, and we didn't know what would grow in this soil or in this climate. I knew that I didn't know enough about what I was doing, so we planted all these vegetables, and then I started reading and reading and reading, and it's contagious, and it also builds on itself. So you pick up information, and it helps you understand what someone's talking about. It's kind of your building blocks. So the first year I would just dig a hole and plant something and see what happens. Don't overthink it. Nature has already figured out how to grow a plant. What plants did we grow this year? Let's see, we started off with some garlic, and we grew some zucchini and some cabbage and some broccoli and some tomatoes, some cantaloupe, some watermelon. We have raspberry bushes. We grew beans, bush beans. We have 4 different kinds of peppers, bell peppers, cayenne, jalapeno, Peter peppers. We grew some carrots. I tried pumpkins and cauliflower. And we have a perennial of chives, which comes up every year. Yeah, each plant is unique in where it wants to live. Chives, for example, want shade. We tried them in the full sun, and they thrive best in full shade. So for that plant, that's where it wants to live. A plant like garlic or onions, they have such a small leaf that they need full sun to maximize the photosynthesis on that green space. Where you have something like broccoli or cauliflower, they might tolerate shade a little better because they have such a huge leaf that they don't need as much sun to produce the same amount of energy. And I think that the tomatoes are kind of fun to grow because they require a little bit more maintenance than your other plants. I have cages around the tomatoes, so as the tomato is growing, you want to train the vines to stay on the inside of that cage. So you're constantly checking and rechecking to make sure those vines are inside that cage and your main stem is in the cage. So you kind of need to check on those a little bit more. So they're kind of fun. They're more interactive, where a carrot really isn't fun to grow. You just plant the seed and that's it. So where a tomato's a little more interactive. We harvested a lot, and different things you can harvest at different times and for different quantities. This was my first year, and I didn't know how big a broccoli plant would get. And the first head that comes out of the broccoli is the best, and you snap that off. But we didn't know that broccoli would keep producing and keep producing, and it sends up secondary shoots, smaller shoots on the sides. So we've harvested broccoli for 3 months now, just continually. We had started with 6 plants of broccoli, and we've eaten it all summer. Where something like cauliflower or cabbage, you get one shot, you get one vegetable. We've harvested the peppers all summer. The tomatoes we probably had 4 dozen tomatoes off of 3 plants, and there'll be different sessions of harvesting because maybe a dozen or 2 dozen tomatoes are ready. So you harvest them, and then you wait for the green ones to ripen up. My favorite gardening moment was coming out in the mornings with my cup of coffee and going to the pumpkin patch. because the pumpkin flowers are bright orange and the bees are just drunk with pollen. You can sit there and watch them and they don't bother you, and you can just see these bees just laced in pollen, just coated in pollen, and they're just pollen drunk. And it's fun to watch them bounce from flower to flower, and the pumpkin flowers are just bright orange. They're beautiful. One day I noticed our beans were being eaten. All the leaves were just being eaten away, and I could not figure out what it was. I was out in the garden with Scotch tape and a jeweler's loop, taping down bugs and looking at the bugs and cross-referencing them to my literature to try to find out if it's a pest or a healthy insect, because there's hundreds of healthy insects you want in your garden. And eventually found out, because I came out at night, I determined it wasn't a bug during the day, it was some nocturnal bug. So I came out at 10 o'clock at night with a flashlight, and I had gastropod mollusks, slugs, everywhere. They were all over the beans. And one thing people suggested, an organic way, is to take 2 beers out at night. You put them in a little container, and supposedly the slugs will be attracted to the yeast in the beer, and the other beer's for you. You just sit there and drink your beer and watch your slugs go into the slug traps. But I found it was very ineffective. Maybe I tried different ways, but I bought some slug poison, some slug pellets called Sluggo or Escargot, and it took care of the problem. You just sprinkle the pellets on the ground and they die. I did have other problems with the garden. I did have a critter problem. My garden is surrounded by a fence that I built myself, and for 2 years I was thinking of this fence and looking at the other fences in the neighborhood to try to stay congruent with the neighborhood. And we weren't planning on having a garden then. So of course I built a fence with 1,000 entry holes for rabbits. One day I came out and I saw a rabbit in the yard, and I didn't have any weapons with me except a soccer ball. So I picked up the soccer ball and I went towards it, and he took off, and I whipped the soccer ball at him, hit him and rolled him across the yard, and he jumped up and took off. And to keep the rabbits out, strengthened the perimeter, got chicken wire, poultry netting, and threaded it into the bottom 8 or 9 inches of the fence. So just that lower part was strengthened, and I built a live trap, and we trapped a couple of them and relocated them. How did gardening fit into my lifestyle? It was a very seamless, natural fit. I'm self-employed, so my hours of work are irregular. So it helps in the morning, because I don't have to wake up and rush off to work. I can take my time and walk through the garden. So it's, yeah, you just kind of make it your lifestyle. Gardening definitely affects your way of thinking. And I have 2 small children, which really affects your way of thinking, but they're kind of the same. When they're seeds and little seedlings and tiny plants, you really have to baby them and take care of them and watch them and nurture them and see if anything's wrong. You know, take care of them. But just like children, once they're mature and they're fruiting, you have very little to do. You just kind of peek in on them every now and then, and with vegetables you can eat them. And kids, you just, you know, send them to college. How often do I think about my garden when I'm away from my garden? I am in love. I think about it all the time. Yep. It's something that is, it's a stress reducer. It's not your work, you know, and maybe it's different for a farmer who that is their work and they don't want to think about gardening. But for me, it's not my job. It's not my children. It's not my wife. It's not my bills. It's not my retirement. It's fun. So it's absolutely a place in your mind you can go where there's just, it's fun. And then at the end of the season, you get to eat something.